This episode is brought to you by Vital Farms. Isn't it bullshit to have to question where your food comes from? At Vital Farms, you can trace your pasture-raised eggs all the way back to the source, the pasture. On the side of each pasture-raised carton of eggs, you'll find the name of the farm where your eggs were laid. And when you look the farm up on their website, you'll get a peek at all the sunshine, fresh air, and open space the hens enjoy. Learn more and find out where to buy them at vitalfarms.com. Vital Farms, keeping it bullshit-free.
This episode is brought to you by Kia's first 3-row all-electric SUV, the Kia EV9, with available all-wheel drive and seating for up to 7 adults, with a 0 to 60 speed that thrills you 1 minute and available reclining lounge seats that unwind you the next. Visit kia.com/EV9 to learn more. Ask your Kia dealer for availability. No system, no matter how advanced, can compensate for all driver error and or driving conditions. Always drive safely.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. That's the sound of switching your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling. Harness the best converting checkout and same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Stop leaving sales on the table. Discover why millions trust Shopify to build, grow, and run their business. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech23.
Between the kids being home and hosting, everything in our house gets used up in summer. With Instacart, I can save money by stocking up on all my favorite summer brands. I save time by getting everything delivered in as fast as an hour. And I save myself a sink full of dirty dishes by stocking up on paper plates for the annual summer cookout. Save more on summer essentials? Spend more time enjoying summer. Add summer to cart. Download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Dr. Jonathan Fowler about developing a data culture in order to best leverage your human capital. Dr. Jonathan Fowler, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you, John.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from South Carolina. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about developing a data culture in order to best leverage your human capital. Organizations for a long time have been talking about the importance of data analytics, people analytics, and making more data-informed decisions. Yet, it's been my experience that most organizations still continue to really struggle in this area, knowing what to measure, how to measure it, how to actually utilize the data that they collect in a meaningful way to drive improvement. And so there's lots of different ways we could take a conversation around data culture. We're going to be focusing primarily on the people side of that, people data culture, both in terms of leaders and employees in the organization adopting a culture of data, but also in using that data to leverage better performance, better engagement, and those sorts of things within your organization as well. As we get started, I wanted to share Jonathan's bio with everybody. Jonathan Fowler is founder of Logical Analytics and technical lead, currently serving as CEO. He has been in the data analytics field since 2007. His background in the humanities gives him a unique perspective on data analytics as narrative, and experience in education as a teacher and counselor help bring a nurturing mindset to the practice. Dr. Fowler has served as a sole or lead analytics developer in the fields of consumer product goods, manufacturing, banking, law, and human resources, as well as IT managed services. He has worked at both the team lead and individual contributor role in data engineering, data integration, predictive analytics, and data visualization. He has acted as the outsourced chief data officer and chief operating officer for implementing company data strategies. Always an educator, Dr. Fowler has taught at the graduate level for analytics and data sciences and has published multiple papers in the field. He has his doctorate in big data analytics from Colorado Technical University, his master's in education and BA in English from Clemson University. His doctoral research was the early core of the LDIS analytics impact framework. I'll let you describe that for us here in a little bit. Pleasure to have you. It's great to have someone with your expertise, both from a academic and research and teaching side, but also from a practitioner executive side. Anything else you would like to share with me or my listeners by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in further?
No, I would call out. I love sort of surprising people when they ask, well, how did you get into analytics? Like, well, I was an English major to begin with, and they go, well, how did that happen? But that just goes to show that this field is not just for the always a computer science person. It takes any and all kinds, and that's what makes it a great field.
That's right. And my background's in sociology, and I also am a data wonk myself. So fantastic. It's good to have people from all different backgrounds in this area. Pleasure to have you. As we get started, let's talk about data culture. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, there's lots of different ways we can take a conversation around data culture. I think most organizations would say they want a data culture, but there's a big gap between intention and actual practicalities and implementation. So what do you mean by data culture, and how can we start to really embed that kind of a culture and support it within our organizations?
As early as 2011, there it was a study I cited in some of my early research about what are the biggest hurdles for companies to realize their analytics potential, and the majority of the reasons were around what were called cultural and managerial issues. And that actually, those two things are always brought up in surveys for what's holding us back. There's this focus, and there's so much noise in the space right now. Vendors are really good at saying that our product is going to do it all. Our product is going to solve all your analytics issues. And for the uninitiated, for your regular business owner, you go, okay, well, let's get that right. And then you realize that, okay, for me to install and run and implement, this package for analytics, let's say we spend, a lot of money on Tableau or Looker or something. We realize, wait a minute, our data actually has to be clean to get in there. And if you take even a step back from that, well, data gets clean and is utilized properly and tells us what it needs to tell us, because we actually generate that data and we have guardrails around it, and we understand that we're all kind of working toward the same goal here. That's the data culture. And so we're missing what capital expenditure can we make to make all of our problems go away? Whereas it's like, that's a quick fix, right? As opposed to, well, what do you mean I need to have a glossary for abbreviations? What do you mean I need to have clear roles and responsibilities and data owners and stewards? This sounds like HR stuff. This isn't data stuff. Let me give you money and you install some software for me to use and go away. That's what we're missing. That's the problem, which leads to us missing the data culture.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And you talked about data cleaning, for example. Mm-hmm. Now, for data wonks like you and I, we probably are, our spidey senses go off, whenever
right.
we start to talk about the quality of data. And having clean data actually is a really challenging thing. And maybe you can describe for listeners who maybe don't have a huge amount of background in data analytics, what does that actually mean to have clean data?
I've got a great example, and it makes me chuckle every time. I did some work for a consumer product manufacturer, and they had, let me think, there was, just to abbreviate the word shampoo, they had more variations of abbreviations than there were letters in the actual word shampoo. And so, we're running reports, marketing's getting their stuff, and, they're looking at what they thought the abbreviation should be. And the numbers are underreported because there are 10 other abbreviations. There's also one that just defies all common sense. There was a product called Blonde Experience. And of course, they were using AS400 mainframe for a lot of their core system. And so they had a character limit. And so the abbreviation for Blonde Experience was BLND Experience. I'm going, wait, you abbreviated the shorter word in the phrase. Okay. So those are two extreme examples, but data cleaning and having clean data is everybody understands and expects common definitions around abbreviations, around how numbers are represented, around how, okay, you're responsible for creating this field, they're responsible for this set. Just anything that would lead to a data set giving oddball numbers for no known reason, that usually falls into data cleansing, because it's usually somebody misspelled this or somebody fat fingered that, and we've all done it.
Yeah. So, I mean, garbage data in, garbage results out. And
exactly,
if you don't go through the process, like you said, in your examples, massive underreporting. So you're trying to make business decisions without actual data. I mean, you'd be better off, just making decisions completely blindly than following the results, that aren't actually accurate. And so
right.
It's a big challenge. And anyone who's worked in data a lot, that can take a lot of time. I've worked with organizations on data projects after the fact. So they've been collecting data from processes and different intakes and all these different things. They have all this data they've been collecting for sometimes years, and they haven't really been using it, and they're not really sure what to do with it, but they want to measure and better understand if they're having the impact that they want to have. Are they accomplishing what they're trying to accomplish? All those things, right? And so I asked them, so, okay, what data do you have? There was one organization where they share that with me. It took better part of 6 months just to get everything into a usable format to then actually be able to do something with it, right? And in that instance, I mean, they're probably better off at that point just scrapping everything and putting things in place and starting fresh, with a good process with good data in the first place. And so anyways, if you don't have the good data in the first place, you're really going to be struggling. You're going to be making bad decisions. And so that data culture around making sure that everyone takes ownership, like you said, you have data owners, data stewards, that everyone is sharing a common language around what they're doing and shared expectations. All of that's going to be really, really essential, no matter what type of data you're talking about within your organization.
Absolutely.
And if we're talking now specifically about people data, people analytics, not only am I trying to develop a data culture more broadly and generally throughout the organization, but if I'm trying to better understand things like employee engagement, employee turnover, productivity metrics, KPIs, and various metrics like that, we have to build that data culture into other processes around coaching, mentoring, performance management, that people understand how the data is going to be leveraged, for them to be able to achieve and succeed at their job, how it's going to inform decisions around like what new trainings and learning opportunities are going to be provided for employees so they can improve their performance. All of these things start to layer on top of each other, and it has to start with good quality data, everyone taking ownership and responsibility for it, and then utilizing the data that exists in a way, so as a leader, I can utilize that data in a way to actually help improve the performance of my people.
Mm-hmm. And understanding that begin with the end in mind, right? So understanding that this is going to be used for something, that typically helps people understand why you need to have some governance around what's being put in. You need to have clean data. Data is not just a byproduct of business processes. It is the lifeblood of business processes.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit. You've already referred to some of the challenges with implementations, and sometimes it's just being completely naive and saying
Yes.
we're just going to throw some money behind this. It's going to solve everything. That spoiler alert, that's not going to work. So
Right.
you're going to be in a world of hurt. But what are the types of problems that organizations and leaders tend to face? If we can spell it out more specifically, what are those fail points
Mm-hmm.
while we're trying to go about various analytics implementations?
So the biggest one that I see is under engagement and being underserved, and that actually is what drove the core of my company now, is understanding, well, what do people want? What do people need? How do we figure out a way to tie together analytics maturity and sort of what we call aptitudes or analytics personality types? We're human resources is so awash in personality tests. This is one more of them. So we're adding to the list, but it's around how do you value data? And so let's take, for example, a big under engagement example. There was a implementation that was done for a government healthcare agency, and there was about 130 million of federal money spent on this this sort of universal health record. What we would consider right now, we go to the hospital, everything's in like Epic, right? Basically their version of Epic, but across the entire country. And it was an IBM product. It was a custom build, and $130 million later, they decided, okay, this was a complete disaster. And one of the reasons it was such a disaster is they sort of broad brushed this whole thing. And you've got so many different audiences to serve. They did not take into account where everybody was in terms of data literacy, process literacy, what worked, what they had right now, what worked about it, what didn't work about it. And so it was this sort of, okay, we're going to throw out this monolith, and you're going to have to we're not going to meet you where you are. You're going to have to learn new processes. You're going to, just complete disruption. That probably the under engagement and underserving, I forget the numbers, but they're staggering on what I'll find them. The numbers are staggering on what companies waste because somebody gets the idea that this particular vendor has all of our answers, and then you get the yes crowd, and next thing you know, IT's got the mandate to implement it, and they're going, nobody's going to use this because we're just kind of throwing this thing out there for them to figure out on their own. And 2 years later, it's forgotten about. It was a colossal waste of money. And now they're snake bit and very shy about any sort of analytics implementation.
Yeah, I mean, there's no buy-in, there's no support, and so of
Right.
course people are going to resist, and then they're just going to find workarounds to the extent possible. They're not held accountable usually in that kind of situation, and so eventually, like you said, things just revert back to status quo. And then 130 million, is that what you said? Was that the number?
130 million.
That is crazy. Now I've seen this happen again and again and again in organizations. I've never seen it at the 130 million level, but tons of waste, not just in terms of money, but also in terms of time and energy.
That's the hard part too.
And in terms, you just referred to it, in terms of kind of the ongoing culture and resistance towards future implementations. So when you have an epic failure of analytics implementation, or any IT implementation, or any org change implementation, it not only costs you in the here and now, but what about the next time you need to do something? People are going to be even more resistant. They're going to be even more frustrated, and it's going to be even harder to do it better, and do it well the next time. And that has a huge cost to it also. So for all these reasons, we can't just throw money at it. We have to support people. I was talking to an IT person, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about new system implementations and how they really strive to make it as simple as possible, that they don't want anyone going more than 3 clicks deep. And if it's more complicated than that, then most people won't do it, and they'll find workarounds. Now, are there times where you have to go more than 3 clips deep? Sure, but the point is to simplify whenever possible, to make it as user friendly as possible, and then to support people and train people and get them up to speed and hold them accountable so they actually use it.
That's right. One of the things you mentioned in there, I would call political capital, where you lose so much of that when, like, time is one thing, or excuse me, money is one thing, right? Money, you blow 130 million, and hey, that might be a drop in the bucket based on your budget or what your revenue is or any of that. But your time and your buy-in from employees, you only have so much political capital that you can use for rollouts. And if one of them goes bad, then okay, you got a ding there. If another one goes bad, all of a sudden now that's what is expected. And so there's this jaded feeling across the organization of what's one more thing we're going to have to learn and then forget. And one of the reasons I'm doing what I do is the first time I did sort of my version of this, what we call the LDIS, an early version of it, just the political capital that I got from that, where all of a sudden we weren't just another consultant. It wasn't like an Office Space scene where we're coming in and, we're the Bobs. And it was that bland thing over and over. It was, okay, look, I know that you've been through this scene before, but here's how we're different. Here's what we want to know. Here's why. And by the way, you're going to hear and see the results of what you've told me in this next rollout. And that, the biggest surprise was the political capital we got from it. And that really led me into, okay, this is not just a data thing. This is also a people and HR and culture thing. And here we are.
Yeah, that's a great example. And it kind of gets us into where I want to take the remainder of our conversation, and that is around data empathy. That's an important topic in and of itself. Tell us what you mean by data empathy, and then we can explore how we can go about supporting and developing that.
It's also known, I think I've heard it called tactical empathy as well. But I mean, empathy in general is just so important in life. I have said many times that data is not always this black and white thing. Data is nuanced, and data tells a story. And just like any story, people can get different things from a story. So let's take, in a small organization, let's say you've got marketing, HR, and R&D. And, we're all looking at the same data. We're all driving to the same purpose. But those 3 teams look at and value and use the company's data in very different ways. And, even if we go to something as simple as data governance, we talked about earlier, clean data, right? Well, we need to have a data dictionary, and we need to have standards around abbreviating things, for the simple fact that you and I may come in, we think shampoo, I think of SHP, you think of SPO, right? And we have to have those guardrails because people think differently. And so with data empathy, it's about understanding that I use data, I value data maybe differently. Like I'm a more collaborative thinker, where I use data to increase participation in the organization and buy-in and collaboration, right? You may be more of the competitive type where you use data to make sure that we win the market. We're always on the cutting edge. You want to see KPIs and you want to see accountability. Well, we're in the same company. We're driving to the same goals. And it's okay for us to use data differently. Where it comes into play is if a consultant or vendor comes in and has a new ERP or a new BI tool to implement, they've got to really scratch both of our itches. And if all they talk about is commitment to the organization and this is going to help communication and blah, 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 you're probably not hearing what you want to hear because you're thinking, well, how's this going to help me win in the market? And if all they talk about is that, I'm going, well, does this mean we're going to be purely, KPI driven and cold and hard now? What happened to fostering communication? So, just that one example, there's a really interesting dynamic happening there. And for anybody, not just a vendor who's wanting to implement something, but CEO, COO, department leads, HR, people team, you have got to be aware of that, because I honestly feel like, and I hesitate to say this a lot, but we are rightly focused on team diversity and plurality. I think data empathy is one of those places that we could honestly look at that a little harder when we look at diversity and inclusion, because again, not to minimize any other parts of that, but hey, this is a material difference that maybe we're not giving enough attention to.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there's just so many great ways we can utilize data when we build that culture, when we establish more data empathy. I love how you talk about the stories we tell with the data that we have, and just also recognizing that we need to meet people where they're at, and they're coming at this from different places, different levels of understanding, different levels of sophistication. I could go in to a meeting and try to convey, really complex linear models or multi-level modeling, or like all these different super complex things. And guess what? That's not going to be very effective, and it's not going to accomplish very much, because I'm not meeting people with where they're at, and I need to find the story in the data to be able to share that in a compelling way. Mm-hmm. And so we just need to always come back to that and to remember that, to identify core objectives, like you said, begin with the end in mind, understand the objective of what you're trying to accomplish, make sure that you're collecting the type of data that will actually help you to get to that objective, right? Yes. That you're measuring the right stuff that's actually relevant, that's going to be helpful and useful. And then as we build this data accountability culture, and build it into processes and systems and, performance and evaluations and all of that, as we build it into our DEIB efforts within the organization, it can really enrich what we're trying to accomplish. It can allow us to make much better decisions, much more, objectivity is sometimes a bit of an elusive ideal, but we can be more informed, less subjective, less biased in how we're going about making our decisions. And that is going to be helpful. Well, Jonathan, this has just been a really fun conversation. I note the time. I'm going to have to let you go here in just a minute. But before we wrap up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
So our website is logical.us, logicle.us. I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Jonathan Fowler. And we also, I was going to say we're on other social media, but we're on LinkedIn. We're barely on Facebook, because I'm not on Facebook, but we are there. But the website's going to be the best way. My email address is Jonathan, JONATHAN @logical.us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Jonathan and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. You enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page. And please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.